Furzy, Kyle, and Dan. And Todd, we are about to enter into the NHL where, if people remember, after the Olympic layoff, it is very hard to watch the style of hockey that we're about to see.
That is exactly true. And unfortunately for Leafs fans, Toolsy, I don't think they were able to petition the league to add some points back to their playoff prospects. So we're going to see mathematically what it's going to take with a runway that continues to shorten. But before we get into some of the nuts and bolts, Toolsy, I'm glad when we got on the show today, you didn't proposition me the same way you did with Pierre Maguire in the wake of one of those Team Canada performances. I'm glad our relationship is above board. So thank you for treating me as an equal and not someone that you can take advantage of once we're off the air.
You have to fill me in. What the hell did I do? Now I'm confused.
Kyle, do you want to do the honors, Kyle?
Dan, don't you remember when you were signing off with Pierre that you guys said you had to get to some sex, and then you said something else? It was obviously a course correction.
Right. I said sex, but it was not sex. Correct. Now I remember.
So on that note, Todd, look, please finish.
We'll start there, and we can build. We can only get stronger from here on out. The way I say,
yeah, I love it.
Okay, so the Leafs begin in Tampa Bay tonight. Now, as someone who has spent a considerable amount of time at Club 11 myself, can I interest you in a Tampa Bay Lightning puck line tonight, Todd?
I mean, this is an interesting spot, and condolences out to John Cooper, who won't be with the Tampa Bay Lightning today or tomorrow after the passing of his father. But you have to imagine this is a team that's going to rally around some of those ancillary situations away from the ice. And to your point, Kyle, you look at what these players have gone through away from the team over the last couple of weeks. You wonder which group is going to come back and be able to hit the ground running. Of course, the big story with Toronto will be the return of Austin Matthews potentially, and what he looks like if he's carrying around an 800-pound piano on his back. And for Tampa, they're going to get a little bit of reinforcements with Braden Point returning to action, Nick Paul ending up on IR. But this is a Lightning team right now who I think's only focus over the next 20 to 25 games, getting healthy, make sure they're peaking at the right time, because you look at the pecking order in the Eastern Conference, and there's really a massive gap from Tampa, Carolina, and then everybody else. Meanwhile, for Toronto, they can't afford to let any points slip through their fingers if they're going to have a snowball's chance in hell to try and get themselves back into that wild card discussion.
I mentioned the level of play we're about to see. So does that translate into low goal totals, or are we going to see them fill the net?
We don't have a massive sample size, Toolsy. If you look at the return to play after the Four Nations break last year, you have to go all the way back to 2014 post Sochi to see what the over-unders look like in the first couple of games back. Nothing really stood out. Again, smaller sample size. But for me, I always say that the play can get sloppier, but the one position that suffers the most when they don't see game action and shots coming through traffic are goaltenders. So I'm going to stay away from a lot of totals early on. You know me, a guy who gravitates towards unders. I want to make sure teams are buying into some of their defensive principles. The goaltending is sharp. So I'll probably avoid that over the next, 2 to 3 days. The one thing we have seen, though, at least last year, again, small sample size, is underdogs perform exceptionally well on the puck line and go out there and really compete with teams that, at least on paper, are expected to be better. And that makes an awful lot of sense, because it almost feels like you're getting back to leaving training camp, teams thinking they have a new lease on life, and the separation of the haves and have-nots won't be as apparent as these teams haven't played together in 17 days or so.
Do you think there's any room to find some point props or something with Canadian players who come back disappointed, especially the superstars? Like I just imagine McKinnon will be playing like a man possessed down the stretch here because he's hurt, right? He's disappointed in what happened over there, and he's got a lot to prove with the Avalanche, perhaps.
I'm so interested, Kyle, to see how teams that are firmly in playoff position are going to handle the return of some of their Olympians, because last year we saw what Florida elected to do. Now, Paul Maurice had the luxury of being a coach of a defending Stanley Cup champion team. He didn't play a lot of his guys on back-to-backs. He didn't care about playoff seeding. He knew that the Panthers were going to have a seat at the table, and of course, they were rewarded with a back-to-back Stanley Cup victory. Jared Bednar, I mean, Colorado has built such a lead, at least in theory. I know Minnesota and Dallas have kind of closed that gap over the last couple of weeks, with Colorado dealing with some injuries as they got towards the Olympic break. But when you look at the minutes that were logged, especially high leverage situations by Nathan McKinnon, who, to your point, we're not sure if he's even close to 100%. Cale Makar, Devin Tays, etc. Will they ease these guys back? And I don't mean put them on minutes restrictions tonight, but on back-to-backs, will we see them log 20 to 25 minutes a pop? Or will the focus be on making sure all the players are headed in the right direction and they're hitting their stride when the games matter the most? Because the emotional expenditure for these guys, whether you're wearing the red, white, and blue for Team USA, whether you're wearing a maple leaf on your chest for Team Canada, or even Team Finland players who went out there and logged 7 games in a high leverage situation, those are games that a lot of the league hasn't had to deal with. And you look at some of the Russian players that'll dot up rosters that are vying for a Stanley Cup. These are the guys that spent their time in Turks and Caicos. They'll come back refreshed and recharged and ready to go, potentially paying off not having to go through the Olympic grind.
Speaking of Nate McKinnon, I hope, you know how the Super Bowl or World Series rings now, you open up the box and it plays a video. I hope that he gets someone to get the stuffy that he got. And then when you open up the box that has the stuffy, it has the video of him looking at it, and we get to see that in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Toolsy, I think that's a great place to go because you are a man who's covered multiple Olympics. Can you walk me through what we have to think the thought process was for members of the IOC to go, you know what, it'd be great to give teams that are getting the silver medal stuffies, whether they're on the men's side or the women's side, and try and hope that they're going to smile and see this as some sort of cherished possession that is going to remind them of the heartbreak that they suffered on international hockey's biggest stage.
Well, two things they were looking for. Okay, we're going to sell a lot of stuffies when we get these out there. And then it used to be flowers. They used to give them bouquets of flowers, if I can remember correctly. You know who the breakout star, and I say this because I live in a house full of daughters, and it's just a lot of what's going on in their world. And Macklin Celebrini is like the Brad Pitt of that age group. They said their Instagrams are full of people doing like reels about how attractive he is. So Macklin Celebrini, if he spends his summer back in Canada, look out.
I mean, I joked. There were a couple of prominent publications who they were asked, the journalists that cover the sport, to name some of their breakout candidates for Olympic play. And a number of them circled Macklin Celebrini. For someone who's knee-deep in hockey, as you guys are as well, you know, he's second on the board to win the Hart Trophy. I go, how can we classify a player like that, even at the age of 19, as a breakout star? But to your point, Toolsy, he no doubt took the world by storm. And I think the casual fans who don't stay up late to watch San Jose Sharks hockey haven't been exposed to the transformation for the second-year player and what he means to an organization looking to rebuild, what he means to Team Canada as the face of the league going forward. And I kind of joked with a couple of my buddies why this may pay dividends. Suddenly you see that level of maturity on full display. And is Macklin Celebrini doing everything he can to recruit Connor McDavid to wear teal if he decides he doesn't want to re-up with the Edmonton Oilers once this 2-year bridge deal is up and he realizes he'll never be able to win a Stanley Cup in his home at Toronto?
And guys, selfishly, instead of the kids, because they've aged out, they aren't going to say, let's go to Disney. They might say, hey, Dad, can we go to a San Jose Sharks game?
It's been a while since
that's a lot better than Disney for me.
Been a while. But look, I'll give the Sharks credit. Macklin Celebrini is much better looking than Joe Thornton, although he's got a long way to go to try to be able to accomplish that same resume.
As someone whose men's league team once actually won the North American Championships in the great area of San Jose, the sales pitch, that's go ahead. It's a wonderful town. You're close to San Francisco. You might as well enjoy it. But speaking of paying dividends and
wait,
not winning,
the San Jose sales pitch? Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. I played a men's league tournament there once and we dominated. So it was that I can see no other reason for Connor McDavid to delay his pathway because the Edmonton to San Jose transit line is well documented.
I mean, look, Kyle, if you've spent your winters for the last, decade plus in Edmonton, isn't anywhere a significant upgrade?
Yes.
I mean, even dealing with the rain in the Pacific Northwest, if he decided to go to the Canucks, would be a step in the right direction. No disrespect meant to all of our great viewers tuning in from Northern Alberta.
So, speaking of dividends and not winning Stanley Cups, I'd love to hear your opinion on whether or not captaining a gold medal team like Austin Matthews has just done helps the Leafs in any significant way, adding that to his resume, or is this just going to pave his path out of town?
I mean, given his decisions after winning the gold medal, that may paint him in a more negative light with Toronto Maple Leaf fans than anything else. But Kyle, for someone that had the opportunity to sit next to me at T-Mobile and watched Austin Matthews decide in 3-on-3 hockey that he didn't want a back check to try and stop the game-winning goal, it had to be refreshing to see him play a 200-foot game, go to the greasy areas, and realize he didn't have to be the Steph Curry of the National Hockey League working around the perimeter trying to lean into his sharpshooting capabilities. I'm not going to say the monkey is off his back by any stretch of the imagination, but you have to imagine for Austin Matthews, having that team accomplishment on his resume now should resonate. Maybe it helps his leadership role within the Maple Leafs room going forward. But until he wins the Stanley Cup as a member of a franchise that has been long suffering, desperate to try and find some of that postseason glory, I don't think Leafs fans are going to go, we really believe Austin Matthews turned a corner because he won a gold medal donning a Team USA sweater at the Olympics.
What if the Leafs say, okay, he's got his gold medal. His trade value maybe gets up because he's got that. Maybe now's the time to trade. Would we see a blockbuster move from the Toronto Maple Leafs involving Austin Matthews?
I just think there's so few destinations where Austin Matthews would be comfortable going. You figure LA, maybe New York is part of a rebuild.
Washington.
Joked about it for a while that, when the Coyotes were still in Phoenix, that he would be the perfect piece for them to try and build around, given his local ties and everything else. I think Austin Matthews isn't going anywhere as a member of the Leafs. Him and William Nylander are going to sit down and have their own kumbaya to make sure they can pull in the same direction. But you look at some of the great coverage around speculation when it comes to the trade deadline for what the Leafs are going to do. I mean, this is suddenly a franchise that has a good amount of cap space, and they just have to figure out how they want some of those forward groupings to look going forward. But I think the bigger question for the Leafs, and it's one that I know Leafs fans have had for years, is how do you go out there and try and rebuild that blue line? Because you have a bunch of misshapen pieces that you're trying to lean into. And Morgan Riley was supposed to be that linchpin. I'm not sure what his trade value looks like. You gave up a lot to get Brandon Carlo last year at the deadline. Chris Tanev isn't exactly a spring chicken by any stretch of the imagination. So even with that cap space, I mean, the Leafs really have to attack this blue line, whether it's at the trade deadline coming up to try and shed some assets, but to make sure that is a focal point if there's anybody that they're able to get that try and become that first team or second team pairing that they can lean into, log in 20, 25 minutes a night and feel confident in doing so.
And so speaking of that trade deadline, I spoke with both Pierre Maguire and Dennis Bernstein, and they both agree the trade deadline that the Leafs have is going to be completely dependent on what happens over the next 3 or 4 games coming back from the Olympics. Agree or disagree, Todd?
I agree, but it really shouldn't, Kyle. I mean, I think the worst thing for the Leafs was them finishing strong going into the Olympic break, or as if they limped to the finish with a losing skid, fans could have gone, all right, we know we're out of it. We can shed some of our assets and figure out how we can go through a light retooling of sorts, but creating that false hope and then the potential that, heaven forbid they win tonight in Tampa and follow it up there for the taking, that if we see the Islanders fall out, you see the Pittsburgh Penguins fall back to earth with no Sidney Crosby, who's going to miss nearly a month. The Leafs need to go into the deadline as sellers. Under no circumstance should their fans or the front office be rubber stamping a potential addition of assets instead of trying to make sure they're better for 2027 and beyond.
And I told you exactly. I gave you the blueprint on how the Leafs can capture the imagination of their fan base because, Kyle, you've probably seen this too here. Just this current form of the Leafs, people are just, it's now beige paint on a wall. You're like, nothing. There's nothing here. They need a complete nuclear bomb dropped, and that would be the move that would do it. And people would be like, okay, you got my attention.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I just wonder what the trade value actually looks like. I mean, if we're even sitting here trying to come up with a hypothetical, I mean, is it Austin Matthews to the Kings for draft capital and you get a Quentin Byfield in return? I mean, the Rangers don't have anything that they theoretically could deal, and you feel like Austin is going to throw a fit if he's not going to some of the bigger American markets where he can tap into, some of the potential star power that's there. And as ridiculous as it is to say, I don't think Kyle Dubas is picking up the phone trying to figure out what the Pittsburgh Penguins can do to pair Austin Matthews with Sidney Crosby going into the twilight of his career.
That's Utah would be a good fit, I think. Hey, so I talked about
maybe
how
Seattle. I mean, the Kraken could use a superstar, but I can't see Austin Matthews headed out to Pacific Northwest.
Nah, no chance. He wants warm sunshine. I told you how Macklin Celebrini has captured the minds of teenage girls across this country. You know who's going to capture the minds and the Instagram reels of sports fans that are probably men is Kaz Okamoto and the size of his legs. I talked about that with Keegan Matheson this morning. I am transfixed by this guy's a truck. If you have seen highlights of him, the newest J from Japan, he is a monster in like physical specimen form.
Has Keegan been allowed to get close to his thighs and be able to take a tape measure to get proper measurements to see?
He described it as a hockey build. He's got a hockey build,
which may not necessarily be the best thing for a Major League Baseball player, but at the same time, look, you want some of those physical freaks out there if we're looking for superhuman levels of performance. But I have to know, guys. I mean, does George Springer endear himself to teammates wearing the red, white, and blue sweater in batting practice and around Dunedin during spring training? Or does he make himself a target that the first time he stands in the box to face live pitching from his own teammates, they're throwing a little high and tight?
I think you grossly overestimate how many Canadians play for the Toronto Blue Jays, Todd.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, maybe he gets hit with a bag of peanuts for the first home game at Rogers Center.
I know each of those players, returning players from last year's team, for each at bat that they step up for the first time in Toronto, standing ovation, deafening for every single one of them.
Toolsy, are you buying the Jays as the second favorite of the American League East behind only the Yankees? Or do we think they get out of the gate slowly and
behind the Yankees? Come on,
I just pulled that up. I was just going to ask you, what do you make of the Yankees being favored in every future bet over the Blue Jays? Well, why is that?
I mean, I'm a Yankees fan, but I don't love the roster by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not writing to bet the Yankees at such a short price. I'm also not going to sit here, though, and clamor to bet the Jays. I think they're right around plus 250 at last check at Bet Rivers. If I'm looking to try and make a case in the American League East for a team that I want to bet this far in advance before we see game one of the 162-game regular season marathon, I think the Baltimore Orioles.
No, Chris Bassett. No, they've got Chris Bassett. He said bad things.
Well, I mean, Chris Bassett is a significant upgrade from some of the guys they were trotting out there to cobble together 27 outs last year. I mean, Kyle Bradish returns healthy. I think the Orioles would be the team if I was trying to make a case from a betting perspective that offered upside and opportunity at plus 450. I would be much more inclined to back the Orioles than I would the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Yankees, or the Tampa Bay Rays.
Very interesting. What about other future markets with baseball? What else do you think we could look at? Anything like in perhaps the home run totals? Because I expect the big dumper to obviously regress a little bit from last year's historic totals. Anything on player props that interest you?
So one thing to keep in mind, you always want to look around Major League Baseball and figure out some of the unique tweaks and adjustments that we've seen from a stadium perspective. And I think two to keep in mind, Tampa goes from a very hitter-friendly environment playing outside at Steinbrenner Field to returning to the Trop, which we know can be one of the more difficult environments from an offensive standpoint. So if you're looking at some of the Rays' more prominent players, I think you're going to see some offensive regression from some of those guys, And then for Kansas City, I mean, Kauffman Stadium has typically been a building where home runs go to die. So what do the Kansas City Royals do to try and put more bodies in the seats? They should bring in the fences and make it a little bit more conducive to power. So I think looking at a guy like Vinny Pasquantino, if he's able to catch lightning in a bottle to go over his home run total, maybe flirt with being a league leader if he can stay healthy, as an extremely attractive option. And we know the Sacramento Athletics, or whatever the hell we're calling them, is another team that's going to continue to put up crooked numbers. So I think Nick Kurz to go over his home run total makes a world of sense. And Kyle, this is the Toolsy influence. I'd normally sit here and clamor to bet unders, but I know Dan to tell me he's got a poor internet connection if I don't root for human achievement on the baseball field, knowing that injuries can oftentimes be the number one thing that derails these guys from going over those lofty expectations.
You mentioned field changes at Kauffman, which I didn't know about. Hopefully the waterfall remains. The Trop has a new roof. Did they make any changes to the field, or did they just patch up the roof?
Nope, I think they just patched up the roof. We know St. Petersburg hasn't exactly been fond of this Rays team in the past as we continue to get renderings of what a new stadium would look like. And Toolsy, I'm not sure they actually really repaired the roof. Maybe they just had a deal with Hefty or Glad, and they just got a bigger trash bag that they were able to stretch over that. And they're hoping they don't get hit by another hurricane over the next 9 months to complete a full regular season of baseball there.
You remember the outfield walls in Minnesota used to be trash bags.
Oh, the baggies at the Hubert Humphrey Metrodome, the highlights of Kirby Puckett throwing his body into that and going, what is he, what's behind that? Are those seats? Is it storage facility? I mean, nobody knew exactly what was going to be behind the baggies in the outfield. And when you saw the Twins playing for World Series, back in the early 90s, like 1990, 92, et cetera, right around then.
Any wall that can hold Kirby Puckett from going through it at full tilt should be used to do the roof as well, because Kirby Puckett is a hurricane running towards the track.
I mean, Kyle, back then, Kirby Puckett was svelte, all right? Kirby Puckett was a physical specimen at that point of his career. What happened when he let himself go after his playing career is neither here nor there.
Guys, I leave you with a question to see who can answer this, because we brought up the Baltimore Orioles. Every time I think of them, I think of Chris Davis. You guys have two options to make a guess. When is he being paid until, or you can guess how much he's making this year from the Orioles. Kyle, start with you.
He's being paid until, let me guess, 2032, and he's making $28 million this year.
Okay.
28 million to do nothing. Boy, we all dream of those kind of jobs. I wish I could hit a baseball once out of every 10 plate appearance and strike out 270 times a year. I'm going to stretch that repayment plan out, Toolsy. I'm going to go 2042. So I'll take 10 years past Kyle's guess.
You are both wrong. He's being paid until 2037. This year, he's making $3.5 million. And then starting in 2033, until 2037, he'll only be making $1.5 million. So Chris Davis and I hope he sends a gift to his agents every single year.
It's a nice little annuity. We maybe should put him in the Sports Business Hall of Fame right alongside another player who's going to find a lucrative payday in Kirk Cousins. 311 million career earnings already. Going to get released and be able to sign another multi-million-dollar deal coming up soon.
Will there be a Chris Davis day the way there's a Bobby Bonilla day every year?
Look, this is a great opportunity for you guys to be able to start it. I'm not sure most casual baseball fans remember Chris Davis in any meaningful capacity, but I think this could be an opportunity for us to start Chris Davis Day. Toolsy, what day does he actually receive those annual payments?
Doesn't say the exact day. Maybe they probably spread it out over the year instead of one lump sum.
That's disappointing. I thought it was going to be one lump sum.
Wait until we start Shohei's in like 10 years.
Yeah.
Because that's when he makes real bank, when he's done playing. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Always a pleasure.